Hello, I'm back. Thank you so much for sticking around and clicking on the video. I know it's been a few months since I've released a video, but long story short, I was suffering from some pretty bad burnout late last year, but since Retro Game On is now back in full production swing, I figured I'd better do the same for Brendan's Odyssey. And it's been a bit of a frustrating experience, to say the least. I've had a couple of false starts, which hopefully turn into a video sooner or later, but I figured to just get things started, just ease myself over the line, because the first videos you make on the return are always the hardest. I'm just going to combine my three loves, which is basically making videos, riding my bike, and local history. So today we're going to be checking out the remains of the Belmont Spur Line, which was a train line that ran off the Midland Line to Ascot Racecourse and, going over the river and all that. Long story short, this was dismantled in the mid-1950s, but today on my bike we're going to retrace its steps. Enough of awkwardly standing around in my garage, however. Let's hop on my bike and head down to where the line started. The Belmont Railway Spur, also known as the Perth Racecourse Railway or the Belmont Branch, ran from the Bayswater portion of the Eastern Railway over the Swan River and terminated at the Perth Racecourse in Ascot. This operated from 1885 to 1956 and included two stations: Watley, which was near where it spurred from the Eastern Railway, and another at its terminus next to the racecourse. This railway line doesn't appear to be well known, so I'm eager to discover what remains. Back in the 1850s, even though it was only several decades after Perth was established, horse riding was already very common because, English people. Since this was 170 years ago, transport was limited. Most jockeys rode their horses to the track, while others would even swim across the river as there was no bridge. A section of the riverside was known as Horse Landing, which one of my sources claims still exists. The description of the location is vague though, simply stating that it's just downstream of where the Spur Line's bridge was. My educated guess is this little beach that juts out of the foliage. It's close to where the bridge was, and the river is ever so slightly slimmer in that spot. I can only go back in time as far as the 1950s, but it appears the riverbank there hasn't changed that much. Later, a pulley system was devised to transport horses across, but finally, a footbridge was built in 1881. This coincided with the opening of the Guildford to Fremantle line and was intended as easy access for the residents of Belmont. Interestingly, this structure included a drawbridge. This was operated by the caretaker of the racecourse and incurred a toll to be lifted for river traffic. Supposedly, this was situated approximately 1 kilometre upstream from the present-day Garrett Road Bridge, which is essentially where the railway bridge was built soon after. Proposals for the railway route went all the way back to 1874, and this included routes that looped back around to Perth instead of terminating in Ascot. This was continuously proposed over the years, even when the line was built. Here's another proposition in a 1947 roadmap where it connects to the Burswood station. However, these ideas would all eventually be squashed by funding issues, several world wars, and pushback from whoever would be negatively affected by a new train line in an established area. So, a spur line it stayed until demolition. The railway corridor from Bayswater to the river was actually originally surveyed for a railway line to the town of Bunbury, 180 kilometres south of Perth. This was eventually changed to a different, more direct route, but it likely kickstarted the construction of our Belmont line. Construction started as a single track spur in 1885, but for now it would just be to the river as per the original survey for the Bunbury line. The railway was terminated at the river and boats would ferry punters across. Back to the present day, however, this is where the line would have originally spurred off from the Eastern Railway. Today, the location is home to a very different railway junction. This original portion of the Eastern Railway is still commuter rail and runs from the suburb of Midland to the city of Perth. However, there is now a spur line heading from here to the airport, all of which is underground and the newest rail line to open on the Trans-Perth network. Additionally, heading north from here will soon be the Ellenbrook line, which is due to open later this year. This includes the construction of a massive viaduct that runs from Tonkin Highway to the newly built Bayswater station, and I think it's pretty cool. But regardless of all that, the Belmont Spur Line deviated from the Midland Line and crossed the old alignment of Guildford Road. By my guesstimate, the level crossing was more or less in line with this fence. I've guessed that by switching between old and new aerial photographs on Landgate's map viewer. Interestingly, this stretch of Newton Street is still on the original alignment of Guildford Road, although it has looked like this for a very long time. Guildford Road had been altered to its much straighter, current alignment by 1961. Still, this area would be unrecognisable to anyone from the 1950s. 3 train lines, Guildford Road and Tonkin Highway all currently converge in this spot. I'm sure it would have been much quieter back then, that's for sure. The railway would have passed through the land something like this, up to where Watley Station was. Even from over here, we can see that the area is still vacant land. Watley Railway Station was just south of the intersection of Fickens Way and Wyatt Road. The area around the station is completely different now, except the alignment of Wyatt Road mostly remains unchanged. That is, of course, except for the fact that it didn't appear to cross the railway line at all. This is difficult to tell from this grainy aerial photograph and a bit ambiguous on this 1918 street directory, but while I wasn't able to find any clear photos, luckily I have this cartographic map from 1934. Thank goodness for the State Archive. It's clear on this map that Wyatt Road didn't cross the railway. It also shows how basic the station was. It's hard to read, but that text in the black says rail level landing. My guess is that means there was no platforms, instead possibly something like compacted earth. Let me know if you think otherwise. I couldn't spot any structures on this landing either, but there was an instruments cabin next to 6 levers. I also wonder what EC stood for. Comparing old and new aerial imagery, I think the station started about here and ended here. Seemed fairly long, but it would be cool to find more information. The closest photos I found were of a sign for the station, likely heading out considering the curves of the track, and another showing a wooden shelter. That shelter could be anywhere on the track, but I do believe it's the same curve as before, just the camera is facing in the opposite direction. The topography makes sense too, if you consider this sandy bank. The purpose of the map is the old man's camp to the east. Their words, not mine. They were otherwise known as the Watley Park pensioners, who were, for the most part, ex-railway workers who decided to live simple lives off the land in retirement. This map shows the location of each dwelling and who occupied it. A bunch of names have also been crossed off, presumably when they died and their house was demolished. If you would like to read more about the Watley Park pensioners, I will link to a great article about them in the description on a blog called The Dusty Box. Besides the suburbia that skirts around it, this area has remained quite barren. I'm surprised it's been kept vacant for so many years. Well, let's hop back on the bike and head towards the Swan River, continuing to retrace the route of the line. Now, I couldn't find a reliable source for a date, but sometime throughout the 1880s or 1890s, the line was extended over the Swan River and a new railway station was built at the racecourse. Then, in 1896, a survey was undertaken for the line to be duplicated, including a parallel bridge for both safety and traffic reasons. This cost £5,500 and was completed by 1898. They would have run parallel to where this temporary storage yard is. The fact they would have been parallel makes sense when you check the boundaries. Those lots look like they may have been market gardens or something like that back then, but the boundaries remain and are owned by the council now and can be used for the storage yard. Coincidentally, the storage yard is used by Metronet, who are building the Ellenbrook line I referred to earlier. Further up, the line would have run along Wright Crescent, which did exist at the time, but back then was called Belmont Road. The trains to the racehorse included special carriages to accommodate the horses. Apparently, up to 60 horses could travel per train. Cheekily, jockeys and stable hands would hide in the horse compartments for a free ride. Several local brickworks also used the line to transport products to the river, where I assume the journey continued by boat. Additionally, there were picnic trains. These transported passengers to the riverfront where they could have a nice picnic. And I can confirm, I've picnicked there before. It's very nice. The train would then continue to the racecourse and turn back around to pick up the picnickers. Neither of these services benefited the local residents that much. Besides the commercial runs, trains for the picnics were ticketed events, and the other trains only ran on race days. Disgruntled residents formed the Ascot Progression Association in 1901. Through lobbying and petitions, they eventually received more regular rail service. These were still never regular enough, however, and the petitioning continued throughout the early 1900s. Back to me and my bike, we're now approaching the modern-day Riverside Gardens. This includes a massive dog park, a bird sanctuary, and plenty of otherwise open and green space. Like I said before, it's a great place to have a picnic by the river. The racecourse is still quite prominent on the other side too. An interesting oddity I found nearby was this, an olive tree. A plaque next to it says it was planted around 1850, and since there was no church in Bayswater yet, the services were held under its shade. It's amazing it still stands, considering how much development has gone on around it since the 1850s. We're approaching the river now, and I should be right on line where the track was. There really are no signs there was a railway here at all. Any sort of earthworks that might have existed is long gone, let alone anything like ballast or sleepers. But hold on, what is that I can spot in the distance? This unassuming mound of dirt is theorised to be for the bridges that once existed. This was highlighted in an old Flickr post by user Purple Worm in 2009. That post was how I originally learned about this old railway. It's a bit hard to see, but if you squint, the outlines of the bank kind of line up between captures of historical imagery. I wouldn't expect it to be an exact match after decades of landscaping and development, but the theory holds water. These days, however, there's nothing up top except for weeds, a power pole, and a survey mark. What does remain on the riverbank, however, are portions of the bridge itself. There's not too much to see, granted, but if you visit the river when the water is clear enough, you can spot a few stumps and other pieces of wood. Also, jellyfish. Lots of jellyfish. There's also this notice board nearby that's mostly for marine safety since there is a boat ramp. It does include some historical information, but sadly, there's no mention at all of the railway that would have run straight past it. Oh well, let's make our way along the river, across the Garrett Road Bridge, and continue our journey to where the spur line would have ended. By 1930, there was a proposal that the city of Belmont should buy the railway bridge and convert it into a road bridge instead, since there still wasn't a connection to Bayswater over the river. Apparently, residents were walking along the railway bridge to cross, since it was their only unsafe choice without having to trek kilometres up the riverbank in either direction. Thankfully for all involved, the Garrett Road Bridge was instead built in 1935.
Sorry mate, I'll just squeeze past you. Excuse me.
After that ordeal, we can make our way up along the river again, this time parallel to the racecourse which still operates to this day. Our destination is Gould Reserve, to see what remains on that end. It was obvious right away that there are way more remains here, including more defined sections of wood and chunks of concrete. I know it's still not the most exciting thing in the world, but it's nice to see some sort of tangible evidence of a railway that's been so expertly wiped off the map. Plus, more jellyfish. And even though it's a lot more landscaped than the opposite side of the river, I'm pretty sure the remains of the bridge's earth mound is here too, also highlighted in Purple Worm's 2009 Flickr post. Up here, the railway would have run right down the guts of this trotting area. Travelling down this access way, I spotted this sign. Shunting trains, no parking it says. We can't know for sure it was from this railway in particular, but we're pretty far from any others. Let's continue down the old route. This proved difficult on a road bike however. My thin tyres are no match for the soft sand. I ended up carrying my bike out of there because I was worried about the fine sand screwing up my gears and brakes. It's here the line would have curved around to its terminus. I'm unable to follow the exact route here, as it would have been on racecourse grounds behind a fence, but there's a nice wide path along Matheson Road for my bike instead. This feels way better than the unsealed accessway. During the time of the railway, Matheson Road was instead called Cambridge Crescent, which would have led to the racecourse train station. We can head right to where the train station was, because it's now a car park. According to aerial photography, the racecourse didn't muck around constructing it either. This capture from early 1961 shows that the whole site has already been raised, although it appears parts of the platform survived until the 1970s. While there are no remains of the train station itself, there is something I want to see. A plaque commemorating the site of the station. It's not much, but it's the only physical recognition of the railway spur that I know of, and since I just explored the entire route on my bike, I would like to think I would have spotted it. So why is there just a plaque here instead of a station and an active railway? Well, by 1955, both bridges were in bad condition. The state government decided to close one completely, but did repair the other. This was short-lived however, as that then caught on fire in 1956. This was believed to have been started by a spark from a locomotive. With that, it was decided that the whole structure would be demolished in 1957, shutting down the whole line. This severely affected several local businesses who were utilising it at the time, including 3 pottery factories and a produce store. Hardly anything remains of the bridge now, because the piles were considered a hazard to river traffic. The remaining railway infrastructure, including the stations, was supposedly removed in 1965. I think my source was written before you could access historical imagery, however, as it appears to me that it was all gone by 1961. There was a section of line retained from Bayswater Junction to where it spurred off at least. This was used as a storage siding to store steam locomotives before they were scrapped. Even that is long gone now, however, it was approximately where the bike path at the start of the video is now. 70 years later, there's hardly anything left. It's just been completely wiped off the map, and no one ever really talks about it, so that's why I wanted to make this video. And the whole area is actually quite historical. We've got this hole in the ground where like a baseball field used to be. There's this old weird small house on the side of Great Eastern Highway. I wonder what that could have been used for. And there's also these old kilns right next to it, which are currently being restored. So maybe I'll make videos about those, maybe I won't, we'll see. But I have actually been on location to film my next video I plan to make, which is none of those things I just mentioned. So stay tuned for that. I'm really happy to be making videos again. I'm sorry there's been an absence, but I'm back now, hopefully to stay. And I really want to thank you for just sticking around and coming back. And if you're new to the channel, please remember to hit that subscribe button and hit the bell, yada yada, you know, the things YouTubers say every single time. But I'll leave it there. Thank you for sticking all the way to the end of the video. It's really hot in here, I'm sweating, especially with this light right up next to my face. So hopefully I'll see you in the next video.